Edmund Tudor was the father of Henry VII, the grandfather of Henry VIII. The Tudor line came from Welsh nobility. They claimed descent from the ancient princes of Deheubarth and the legendary Cadwaladr, the last of the British kings. But they were also involved in a rebellion against the overlordship of Wales by the kings of England. The Tudors were instrumental in this uprising. Edmund's uncles and father were some of the architects of the resistance, fighting alongside Owain Glyndŵr to tear Wales from the English grip. When that rebellion was suppressed, the retaliation was absolute. Heavy penal laws were placed on Welshmen. They were barred from holding land, carrying arms, or holding any office under the crown. But even with all of this, when Henry V died, Edmund's father, Owen, managed to become the clerk of the wardrobe of the Dowager Queen, Catherine of Valois. He became part of the most intimate circle of the English monarchy. He held the keys to the Queen's private life, and in that proximity, an intimate relationship was formed. Owen and Catherine lived a shared life for nearly a decade. They likely married in secret around 1429. During those years, they raised a family in a state of political invisibility. While the court was aware of the children's presence at the Queen's private estates, the identity of their father remained an unacknowledged secret. They had 3 sons and at least 1 daughter, Edmund, the eldest, Jasper, and Owen, who later became a monk at Westminster Abbey. A daughter, Margaret, is also recorded, though she died in childhood. Edmund and Jasper were raised with the education and luxury of royal wards, yet they possessed no official name, no title, and no legal existence in the eyes of the Great Council. They lived as a family in all but name, protected by the Queen's status, while the King's advisors were occupied with the failing wars in France. But Owen and Catherine's relationship was a legal ticking time bomb. A statute was put in place in 1428 that required that any man who married a dowager queen must obtain the express permission of the king. But the king, Henry VI, was only a child. He was not physically able to legally give that consent. This law carried specific crushing penalties. Any man who violated the law would forfeit all of his lands and possessions to the crown. As long as Catherine was alive, her position as Dowager Queen of England and Princess of France provided a shield that the council dared not pierce. Well, that shield shattered in January of 1437 when Catherine died. With the Queen gone, the council moved immediately. Owen was summoned, hunted, and eventually thrown into Newgate prison. His children were separated from him and stripped of their royal surroundings. Edmund and Jasper were sent to the Abbess of Barking, where they were raised as wards of the state. Edmund's life would change in 1452. The king was increasingly caught in a violent struggle between his rival cousins, the Duke of York and the Duke of Somerset. Following a failed coup attempt by the Duke of York, Henry VI was physically and politically isolated. He needed a circle of high-ranking nobles who were tied to him by blood, but who, unlike the Duke of York, could never legally challenge him for the crown. He turned to his half-brothers. They were family, sharing the same mother, but they lacked the specific lineage required to claim the English throne. This made them the ultimate loyalists. They were high-born enough to lead the king's armies, yet legally unable to ever replace him as king. In November of 1452, Henry VI formally recognized them as his brothers and granted Edmund the earldom of Richmond. This was a massive political elevation. The earldom was one of the wealthiest in England. It provided Edmund with the lands and military authority to act as the king's primary lieutenant. But by August 1453, the stability that Henry had built vanished. Upon hearing of the final loss of the English lands in France, the king fell into a complete catatonic state. He couldn't speak, move, or even recognize his wife or newborn son. Because the king was physically unable to rule, a power vacuum opened that the Duke of York had been waiting years to fill. By March of 1454, York, who had already tried to seize the government by force once before, was officially named Lord Protector. This left Edmund in a lethal position. He was one of the king's most prominent loyalists, yet now he had to answer to York. The Duke of York arrested the Duke of Somerset and purged the court of those who were loyal to Henry. But Edmund remained at the center of the government. He was forced into the grim role of a witness to the king's decline. He served on the commission to stand before the catatonic Henry and confirm his inability to rule. Throughout York's year-long protectorate, Edmund lived in the shadow of his rival, maintaining his status and his lands until the king's sudden recovery in 1455. When Henry VI finally awoke from his stupor and regained control of the government, the friction between the king and the Duke of York escalated into open, armed conflict. Henry's chief supporter, the Duke of Somerset, was killed at the First Battle of St. Albans, leaving the powerful Beaufort family leaderless. The Beauforts were the bedrock of the king's party. They controlled the castles and estates that provided the management and food for the royal army. To keep these resources out of Yorkist hands, the king married his 25-year-old brother Edmund to the 12-year-old Margaret Beaufort. Margaret was a descendant of John of Gaunt, and the sole heiress of her father, the late John Beaufort. She held one of the largest private fortunes in England. By merging the Tudors with the Beauforts, the king was putting Edmund in charge of her massive estates so that they could serve as a base of support for the crown. The marriage was consummated immediately to secure the line, and Edmund was dispatched to West Wales to hold the region for the king. Edmund's time as the king's lieutenant in Wales was short. In August of 1456, a Yorkist army of 2,000 men, led by William Herbert and Walter Devereux, marched on Carmarthen. They laid siege to the castle. Edmund didn't have the manpower to withstand a prolonged assault, and with Henry VI's government paralyzed by political infighting in England, no reinforcements were sent to his aid. After a period of resistance, Edmund was forced to surrender. The Earl of Richmond was taken prisoner in the very fortress he had been sent to defend. While he was held in captivity at Carmarthen, Edmund came down with the plague. On November 1st, 1456, at just 26 years old, he died. He left behind his 13-year-old widow, Margaret Beaufort, who was 7 months pregnant with their only son. Alone, in a region controlled by her husband's captors, Margaret fled to the protection of Edmund's brother, Jasper, at Pembroke Castle. It was there, 3 months later, that she gave birth to the future King Henry VII. Because he died of the plague, the body had to be buried immediately. There was no time for a royal funeral procession or a journey to a grand cathedral. He was carried from the castle to the nearest consecrated ground, Grey Friars in Carmarthen. Grey Friars was a Franciscan house. The friars worked directly with the sick and dying, made them the ones equipped to handle the remains of a plague victim. Though the burial was rushed, Grey Friars was still a place of high honor and the closest site of prestige to the castle. Edmund was put into the earth within the choir of the friary church. For 80 years, Edmund's body stayed under a simple stone in that friary in Carmarthen, while the wars he died in eventually placed his son on the English throne. He remained there until, in 1536, his grandson, Henry VIII, began the dissolution of monasteries. Grey Friars was suppressed and dismantled, but Henry VIII issued a specific command to save his grandfather's remains from the destruction. He ordered Edmund to be exhumed and carried across the Pembrokeshire landscape to St. David's Cathedral, the most sacred site in Wales. Henry did not place him in a side chapel. He commissioned a massive chest of Purbeck marble and placed it at the very center of the presbytery, directly in front of the high altar. This is the highest place of honor in the cathedral, a space reserved for saints and monarchs. Originally, the tomb was a display of absolute Tudor authority. The marble chest was covered in elaborate gilded brass plates that depicted Edmund as a knight in full plate armor, surrounded by heraldic shields and an inscription identifying him as the father and brother to kings. But the monument did not survive the 17th century intact. During the English Civil War, parliamentarian soldiers stripped the cathedral of its popish decorations. The precious brasses were torn from the marble and stolen, leaving only the empty stone chest and the indents where the metal had once been. For over 200 years, the tomb stood as a scarred block of marble. The tomb you see today was restored in 1873. A new brass was commissioned to replace the lost medieval original, creating the image of Edmund in his armor and restoring the historical inscription. Standing in the choir of St. David's today is Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond, the father of the first Tudor king, a man who died as a prisoner, but whose blood would go on to change the face of England forever.